Hello gang, Tattooed Biker here with you. And for almost as long as there have been reports of UFOs, or UAPs as they're called these days, there have been reports of bizarre people that sometimes show up, often smartly dressed in black suits, with a cold and unnatural demeanor to interrogate, intimidate, and sometimes just surveil the witness. Well, tonight I've got 3 eyewitnesses who have written in to share their own experiences with the disturbing Men in Black. So grab your darkest shades and let's ride. Number 1. Dear Biker Sir, I found your channel while searching YouTube a while back. Something happened to me that I can't explain, and I'll admit it, I'm scared. My wife and I live in Medina County, Ohio, in the greater Cleveland metro area. We've lived here for about 5 years, in a 2-story house in a residential division. One Thursday evening, I was working at my desk when I heard strange gibberish coming over a local FM radio station. I initially thought it was just interference, but then it started to sound like a conversation. The language wasn't recognizable, and there was an odd humming sound in the background. This went on for about 10 minutes, and then abruptly stopped. Just then, the front of our house lit up in a blinding blue flash, like almost a lightning strike, but there was no thunder, and it was a clear night. Later on that night, while I was in the living room, that gibberish started up again. Although this time it was much clearer. It sounded as if the parties were having an argument of some kind, but here I'm just speculating because I still couldn't understand anything. The following Friday, something very unusual occurred. We had just finished dinner at around 7 p.m. when we noticed a shadow from outside go across the dining room window. I looked out that window but didn't see anything. So I looked out the front door window and I see a plain black van parked on the street down in front of our house. Then I hear my wife yell from the kitchen that someone was in our backyard. I rushed to the kitchen and turned on the security lights. And there, standing on the far side of the patio, was a strange-looking man, dressed in a heavy black suit, white shirt, black tie, and wearing a black fedora. I immediately noticed that he had a very young-looking face, which was partially obscured by the dark black sunglasses that he wore, but he was very pale, with either very small ears or none at all, because I couldn't see any. He was holding what looked like a PC, like a small handheld tablet. I opened the door and I asked him what he was doing. He just looked at me with a blank stare, no expression at all, and then he started walking back towards the side of the house. I followed him back to the front and to the black van. I asked him several times who he was and why he was there. I never received a response. He never even looked back at me. And then he quickly got into the van and drove away. I called the police and filed a report. The officer mentioned that he was unaware of any similar activity in the area. I examined the yard early the next morning and I didn't see anything out of place. I talked to the neighbors, but they never noticed anything unusual. I haven't slept well since that night. This incident is very unnerving to us. I've heard some Men in Black accounts, but I don't particularly find much interest in the subject. Can you explain or conjecture on anything that might be going on? Thank you so much for your time. Signed, Danny. Number 2. Dear Tattooed, I was born, raised, and continue to live in the mountains of eastern Kentucky. I've experienced various paranormal activities all through my life. That even includes UFOs, alien abductions, and other activities that I attribute to to alien or interdimensional beings. The incident that was the most overwhelming was on the night when gray aliens came to take me while I was pregnant. I simply wanted no part of this. When they approached me from across the bedroom, I jumped up and grabbed one of the two beings by its lean neck. I squeezed just as hard as I could until I heard a crack. It dropped to the floor as its head fell back across the spine. The other gray seemed shocked, though it was hard to read a real expression. It gathered up the injured companion and quickly disappeared in the bright light that had originally flooded the master bathroom. I felt very bad about the incident, but I had been out of sorts all day and I just really didn't want to be bothered. When I was a girl, we used to live beside an old cemetery. On some nights, I would get the urge to look out my bedroom window. When I did, I would notice a tall, dark figure that seemed to be watching our house. One evening at dusk, while in our yard, I was approached by a tall, black-cloaked being with a weird glow coming from its face. It stood and watched me for a few seconds and then just turned and disappeared. I've noticed over the years that large, dark-colored cars would follow me around on occasion. This would happen on highways and even secluded mountain roads. My husband and I have also noticed black helicopters that fly above us while driving and often circle our residence. I saw you posted a video about MIBs a while back, and when I saw the video, it shocked me because back in July of 2006, a strange incident occurred while my daughter and I were sitting on our front porch. I never heard or saw a car, but two of these MIBs appeared from around the side of the house and approached us. The pale-faced men were dressed in black suits, white shirts, black ties, and fedora hats. They each carried a thin briefcase and walked, really stiffly, like it was an unnatural movement for them. When they reached the steps, they stood still and looked at me. My daughter quickly ran into the house. I then looked into the eyes of the MIB nearest to me. The color was a vivid lavender, and I felt compelled to continue looking. After a few seconds, the nearest MIB spoke in a very clear-pitched voice. It asked if we had experienced any unusual activity that I thought that I should report. It was a very odd question, but I quickly said no. The being then briefly smiled and thanked me for my time. Both of them then turned and walked toward the road with that weird, stiff-legged walk that they had. And soon they were out of sight. I can't say that I was scared, but I've not had any type of paranormal or alien activity since they visited. I was wondering if people who've had paranormal incidents throughout their lives realize the activity ceases after they are visited by an MIB. Do these MIBs usually just appear out of nowhere? I'd really like some information. Thanks. Signed, Cameron. Number 3. Hello, sir. You have my permission to use this report on your channel. I just ask that you keep specific details, like my name, private. For the record, I'm a very fact-driven person. But I have this story that I just can't explain without it being aggravating to me, as I see others blow it off as BS. I lived in Rice Lake, Wisconsin for a bit in my youth. I was 12 years old at the time and living with my mother, father, and 2 brothers on a large property with a house set back from the road about 5 acres of kept lawn and a backyard of about 2 acres. It's a really open area. We had a radio station across the road, which was a smaller building with a large tower in a field. We basically lived out in farm country. And one neighbor near us on the west side of our house through this solid tree line. That was the start of a pine forest on our property. The other 2 sides of the property had abrupt starts to wheat fields. One night my mom my older brother and I were up watching TV, and the power suddenly went out. We went outside to the front to see if the neighbor was out, as he had a huge barn light that we could see through the woods. Nope, it was out too. As we sat there, we heard yelling from the radio station across the street. "I can't get the generator to start, Ted. Can you call Chris and get him up here, ASAP?" Again, farm country, so no real ambient sounds beyond crickets. Then, around 5 minutes later, a car drove past our driveway and suddenly turned off, like it was driving, and then powered out and rolled to the side of the road. My older brother made the long 5-acre walk, which seemed really long at that age, down the driveway, and Mom and I watched from the porch. He came back and said that the car had just lost all power. He couldn't get it to turn over or crank. Just then, a large blue orb, I'd say about 1,000 square feet or so, shot across from one corner to the other of our rectangular property, from behind our house to across the road, no further up than 4 to 6 stories above our house. We all just stood there amazed. Across the road, we heard the guys at the radio station start screaming. What the hell was that? My mom ran in to call the police and to wake up my dad and little brother, as me and my other brother sat there on the porch. Suddenly, she yelled from inside, "Boys, come here now, I can't wake up your dad." We ran into our bedroom, which was the closest room to the west side tree line, and had this huge glass door wall, an 8-foot-tall glass door basically, and in the bed was my dad and my 5-year-old brother. I personally shook them, and hard, and they wouldn't wake up, wouldn't even budge. Breathing fine, sweaty even, they were solidly asleep. At this point, we freaked out, and noticed that the phones were dead also. We ran outside again, and we started yelling across the road at the radio station, and asking if they had a working phone. They replied no and asked if things were okay with us. Not wanting to yell out a story, my brother said, "Yes, all is well besides all the weird stuff." Just then, on the west side above the tree line, 2 orbs that were pretty far up danced in the sky, zigging and zagging in ways that I'd never seen anything in the air do before. It was as if they were 2 puppies playing in a pattern. One would go left, and the other would chase, and then right, and then up and down, do a big circle, and then go the other way. My brother and I just sat and watched, silently freaking out. We must have said, "What is going on?" about 40 times in the 5 minutes while these orbs moved overhead. Then they dropped down to a lower altitude, and we saw that the orb was a light on the side of a larger object, but couldn't make out what it was really. But they went from the north side of the tree line to the south at half speed, really low and slow. Then swooped up into the sky in a large, progressively faster arc, and then they just disappeared. My mom, who was watching from inside her room through those large glass doors that I had mentioned before, was freaking out. Seeing all this and her husband and kid not waking up was just too much to handle, and she suddenly just broke down and cried. All of a sudden, all the power pops back on. My mom screamed out as it startled her. We ran inside to see her, and she was calming down and splashing water on her face in the master bathroom that was attached to the bedroom. We go out through the glass door to check the sky and see the car that died at the end of our driveway start up and take off really fast. The neighbor's barn light was on again, and we saw the lights on the radio tower that were lit up. At that moment, my dad woke up and said, "Why are you all in here?" Hearing his voice startled us. My mom explained it all, and he and my younger brother just laughed it off. "I was just sleeping. You must not have tried very hard to wake us." The next day, my mom bought a rifle and a telescope and a bunch of books about aliens. She always said the gun was just in case. She would never bring it out unless she felt she had to. I think my dad not waking really shook her to her core. Fast forward to a week later. After so many calls to the police, the radio station, neighbors, etc., we finally got someone to listen to us at the police station and take a real report. They all met in our front yard, near the road as I watched from the porch pretty far away, trying my best to make out what they were saying. 3 days after that, 2 men come to the house who claimed to work for a surveying company and just so happened to be taking aerial surveys of the area and wanted to see if we wanted some pictures of our house. We did have a rather nice house and a well-kept landscape. One of them then opened a briefcase and showed us pictures of our house from the air. And then they said that they visited our neighbors prior that day and heard a pretty wild story. They said that they sure hoped that we wouldn't be telling stories like that to anybody. People might think we were crazy. Now you would think that the exchange would be friendly, but it wasn't. They were cold and expressionless, and they sure didn't look like survey workers. Black suits, black ties, and black fedoras. Now my older brother swears, and I mean swears, that these men had guns of some sort on them. Large handguns on the inside of their suit jackets. Again, not super weird in the area to see guns, but if you're going door to door with aerial pictures of people's houses anyway, it's weird enough, I think, to mention. He saw these guns as he walked in the front door behind them and around their right side to ask the guy why he was in the van taking pictures right now. After that, they abruptly left without another word. As they drove away, we got the license number. We called the police officer who took our original report and called the neighbor to compare stories. A month later, the officer called us back just to tell us that they found out that the plates we gave them wouldn't return a match, that they basically shouldn't exist. Now I know this all sounds dumb and made up. If I didn't live through it, I wouldn't believe it either. Me and my brother have been blown off so many times about this story that we've just stopped saying it anymore. It's just like we nod at each other whenever someone brings up UFOs or other weird stuff. Besides my wife, I haven't told this story in at least a decade, but these are things that I remember did really happen. Thanks for taking the time to read this. Signed, Anonymous. And there it is. All the MIB reports I have tonight. So, what did you think about these accounts? As always, I'd love to hear your thoughts and theories in the comments below, but please, keep it respectful to the witnesses. And if you have a cryptid encounter or a brush with the unexplained that you'd like to share, just send your story to the email address in the description and it may just wind up in a future episode. Anyways, thanks again for riding with me tonight. And as always, stay curious, stay vigilant, stay safe, and I'll be seeing you on down the road a ways. Biker out.